Okay.
So when the CIA in America created the Taliban, they were supposed to be a mediator group. They created them in Pakistan, and they were, these old guys. They were all Mujahideen fighters at one point that now were kind of higher echelon, And so the point of the Taliban was to be this mediator group to go into Afghanistan and bring all the tribal warlords together. Because
Yeah.
what do we do after we helped the Mujahideen defeat the Russians? We just left. We just left
Yeah.
Afghanistan.
Yeah.
We had no post, battlefield plan as to, well, how do we create a government here? How do we reintegrate some of these people back in? And it was what happened after the U.S. left or stopped supporting the Mujahideen was that there was civil war in Afghanistan. Because again, Afghanistan's history has always been tribal. So when Afghans aren't fighting a foreign army or a foreign occupier, they fight themselves for power and territory. And so when the Civil War happened, we created the Taliban. We said, hey, go in there and try to bring everybody together. But what really happened was the Taliban went to Afghanistan and started taking sides with some
Okay.
of these warlords. And then you had a big divide of two pieces. You had the Taliban and then you had the Northern Alliance.
Okay.
So we created the Taliban to go in there and mediate, but
And
then
when
we
you
ended up
say
joining.
we, let's pause for a second because
Okay.
I'm sure when you said it a few minutes ago, there were probably some people like, wait a minute, did he just say
Who's we?
the United States created the Taliban?
Yes. Yeah. The
The
CIA
CIA
specifically.
created the Taliban. I love that
Yes.
because
And that's
because
that's open source.
I know that's open source, but nobody
Mm.
knows that. You know what I mean? So like if you extrapolate that out, the CIA created the Taliban, then the natural question is, well, where does Osama bin Laden fit into that? Did the CIA create him as well? It's also open source that he was a CIA asset, right? But nobody knows
Yes.
this stuff. Give us your
And
take
bin
on all
Laden.
that.
No, nobody knows this stuff because nobody, with the smartphones we have, people I think just don't want to do the research or don't know where to
Yeah.
begin. So that's why I put these little news segments out to kind of educate people. But yes, the CIA specifically from the US government created the Taliban as a mediator group. Now, did they know that they're going to go to Afghanistan and take sides? Maybe, maybe not. But then what happened was when they did take sides, we had the Taliban and then we had the Northern Alliance. So then who do we link up with in 2001 to fight? We actually linked up with the opposite of the group that we stood up with,
Got it.
right? So
Which
it's
was the
almost like
Northern Alliance, right?
we knew that the Afghans would go back to Afghanistan from Pakistan and eventually take sides. And we knew that there was going to be some kind of opposition to the Taliban from other Afghans in the north, possibly. And that was the Northern Alliance. And that's who we actually linked up with in Afghanistan to then help train and all that and then fight the Taliban that way. But that's kind of the beginning of the Taliban and their purpose. Their purpose was short lived, and then they became who they are now. And so, yes, to go back to your question, I would say that a lot of the old Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan probably later became Taliban commanders or some kind of Taliban figure of authority when going into Afghanistan.
Okay, okay. And so, like, obviously the whole Osama bin Laden 9/11, I'll tell you what I've loved more than anything. Fortunately for the Palestinian people and Gaza happening, unfortunately for them, for sure. But man, that has opened up Pandora's box about everything and what the world has watched on our phones in terms of the genocide in Gaza for 2 years. Not only has that opened up a million questions about, let's say, the state of Israel, Netanyahu, all of that, people are going back and they're questioning everything. JFK's
Yes,
assassination,
I love it.
the moon landing, 9/11, 9/11. Literally just the other day, there was more and more videos about Building 7. How the hell does Building 7 fall? It did not get hit by a plane. It falls in a complete pancake, looks identical to every other controlled demolition. So this stuff is like Pandora's box is open and it's not closing. And by the way, I love Gen Z for this. Gen Z is just, they give zero fucks. They have no back history. They have no baggage. They're just calling a spade a spade. So as someone from Afghanistan though, what do you think Osama bin Laden was and where did he fit in all this? Was he really that bad of a guy or was he a scapegoat or what was he?
Well, I think in Afghanistan, he played a viral role because, the bin Laden family is super rich. and they own construction companies and they have contracts. They have contracts with the US, with all these different foreign countries. But I think what bin Laden brought to Afghanistan and brought to the fight was the money and the influence that, or the really, I should say, his network of connections that he brought. And yes, we absolutely worked with bin Laden. That's also open source. The CIA and bin Laden worked very well together during the Soviet invasion. But then at some point, we stopped working with him. And then we started to kind of villainize him or paint him with a different, with a different brush as to who he actually was. Now, was bin Laden like a good person? Maybe I don't think so. But was bin Laden capable of planning such a elaborate terror attack such as 9/11 from some cave in Afghanistan? I personally don't think he was.
Yeah.
I don't think he was fully responsible for 9/11. And in fact, I remember there were sayings that bin Laden came out and actually communicated with the government after 9/11 and said that this isn't us. We didn't
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
But it's like, it doesn't matter who's a good guy and who's a bad guy, because what our government is very good at is we're very good at working with people regardless of whether they're bad or good, but we're also very good at making them look bad when we need to. you
100%.
know?
A
And
hundred
so
percent.
that's it. We use them as pawns, right? I served the military for 23 years, 5 in the Marine Corps, the rest in Special Forces. And someone could argue that, Kawa, well, you were a pawn for all the forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I would say, you know what, man, technically you're right.
Yeah.
Technically, but I don't look my, I don't, but I don't, what I do on a personal level or on my individual level now is I, you know, it doesn't matter to me what I did as far as the bad stuff, or let's say you say, well, Kawa, you were one of those terrorists too, because you went into Iraq and you killed people, or you went to Afghanistan and killed people. Well, maybe I did. Maybe I am a bad guy, but everybody tries to repent for what they do. And that's
Yeah.
why what I do now is share knowledge and share my perspectives, not just as a political commentator, but as a Green Beret who has 23 years in the military, who has been to Iraq and Afghanistan several times, other places in the Middle East. And as a Muslim, I'm very familiar with their cultures and traditions. Rapport building is very easy for me, and so to say bin Laden was a terrorist, yeah, okay, let's agree on that. He's a terrorist. But to say that he was responsible for 9/11, I would have to disagree with you.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. And the funny thing is, to say bin Laden was a terrorist, I'm not going to mention the names, but I could mention some very well known American and other country politicians that I would call them terrorists. You know what I mean? Like, the
Yeah.
definition of terrorist to me is something that, quite frankly, could be applied to people that many people call world leaders. So, what was that? So you're Afghani Muslim, and then you're going into Iraq and Afghanistan? Like, man, that's and by the way, if any of this is, like, difficult to talk about, you don't have to answer if I touch a nerve or something, but man, you kinda had to be torn, right? Like, what was that like?
Want the full truth? Watch the full Deep Shallow Dive interview next. And hit subscribe if you're done with narratives and ready to call a spade a spade.